Waniki Suk, Natasuis Jannette Vanderhoop, Natomus Aquinnah Neem Wampanoag. Hello, everyone. My name is Jannette Vanderhoop, and I'm from Aquinnah. I am Wampanoag. Thank you, Leah, for that wonderful introduction. I was thinking that if you had read the PR that they put out, I probably don't even need to do this presentation. So that's it. I'm actually really excited to share this show virtually. I'm going to, I've set up a slideshow for you, and I'm going to read poems along with showing you images of my show. So as Leah mentioned, I'm a professional artist. So this is a spread of my work. I've done the Vineyard Artisans Festival for 15, maybe more years. I'm a published author and illustrator. I use this book to work with children and adults. So visiting schools, bringing my arts and teaching. I'm a poet. This is a wonderful performance piece that I did with a musician friend where I read the poetry and he did the music. He's actually, I saw his name, he's on here watching. Hi, Andy. I'm a yoga teacher. So this is if you want to join me, I am teaching every Saturday at 10 o'clock virtually through the Aquinnah Library. And it's open for everyone. It's a pretty gentle class. It's very accessible, non-competitive. I've been teaching for 8 years. So if you'd like to join me, this is the class. And then I also have a landscape business. I've been gardening for 20 years maybe and started my own business. So this is the show, Treasure Boxes. And this, as Leah mentioned, it was created over the course of 10 years. This is at the local coffee shop. I'm just going to show you a couple places that it's been. This is the Chilmark Library, where I invited my daughter to put in a piece. And if you can see my cursor, this is her little piece. This is not included in the show, but we'll come back to that. I applied for a grant a few years ago it was very ambitious. In the grant, I was going to show this show once a month for a year. So that was very ambitious. And I thought to myself, gosh, if I really get this grant, I'm going to actually have to do this, which was terrifying. And so I'm really glad that I didn't get it. But I will say that that was about 2 years ago. And I said to myself, if I don't get this grant, I'm still going to do as much as I can that I've laid out here. And it became a business plan. And we'll talk about that later in the slide. This is I just took this down from the MV Museum. So this is the museum. It's in an old marine hospital. So you can see the challenges with the windows, the very small spaces to actually hang things, but because they're all very small, it lent themselves to this space. And it was the best it's ever been because she did these stickers. So it was really professional and just kind of the height of where the show has gone so far. And now that it's come down, I'm looking for a new spot to show it. So if anyone has a space that they'd like to host the show, I'd be really happy to do that. So this is the MV Museum. I'm going to read this to you. This body of work was created over the course of 10 years. Each box is unique and has a distinct theme. I've paired the boxes with my original poems to further tell a story, one of grand adventure, personal oblivion, and global and spiritual connectivity. Overall, there is a storyline that is reminiscent of a certain time period when the West was conquered, not just the West of the United States, but of the world. Imagine a time when the Americas were being taken. Pirates were active the world over. Europe was collecting curiosities of the other. Nature was being explored down to the most intimate details, and natural objects were displayed in natural history galleries, including, but not limited to, arts and artifacts of the other. Where somewhere on a quiet shore, my ancestor beached her canoe with no idea of what was coming over the horizon. The ships, the world, technology, advancement, patriarchal rule, death, progress, politics, the founding of America, the new world charging righteously through, touting the banner of manifest destiny. There was a mad grab on a world scale for all matter of treasures. Turtle Egg. This was created 2009, 2017. Mother Nature protects her gifts. The world turns in silence. Geometric balance systems create crystals. The primordial soup, a seed in waiting. The shell cracked when first woman fell through the opening in the sky when the tree of knowledge was uprooted. Canoe, 2012. She beaches her canoe on the shore and follows the footprints, nails dug into the sand, down to the pond where the moon is waiting to meet the sun. But she has been battling the wind. Collection of the Artist, 2015. From Mexico to Alaska, the people live in peace. In the hills of Tibet, the dragon lays sleeping. As the desire for knowledge grows, at first a stirring, and then a wave. It tears through the ancient ways. Capitalism is coming. Mini Natural History Gallery, First Mates Collection of Shells, 2017. The curiosities of the world are collected in an attempt to understand the other. Tiny treasures of nature, sacred objects, artifacts, and galleries, making sense of a barely connected global existence. Pirate Ship, 2015. Desire grows into a frenzy. Wendigo. This is not a friendly place. Hostile mutiny. All for me and none for you. I will hoard my treasures and turn my nose up to the humble. Pirate Booty, 2017, Silver and Gold Hoard. Be careful what you wish for. Everything he touched turned to gold. I have a heart like a river, a brain like the ocean, and a fire in my soul. His and Hers Domestic Bliss, Yin and Yang, 2015. The black and the white. The gray in between. Gender biased. His is dark and rough. Hers is soft and light. Domestic versus rustic. Well, in reality, we challenge these energies. When we know that yin is she and she is black, while he is yang and he is white, the Harry Benjamin complex. We must differentiate so we can segregate, maintain the patriarchal rule. We want her to be demure. Men are making laws to govern how a man and a woman might marry, while love is love. Alt-White, 2017. Governments begin to stumble, recruiting from the poor deplorables, the hopeless Rust Belt, the alt-white, right. Christian dogma owns the day and the night. Hearkening back to when America was great, when the means justified by the dividends. GMO, 2007. The earth endures. She is a little changed. There is no going backwards. No amount of time that can clean up the mess that man has wrought. Monocrop resistant genes. The bees are rogue robots, tiny surveillance machines, but they answer to no one. The only thing that survives is dry air. We breathe it through tubes gratefully. There is no hat to shield you from the sun. This is the destruction that cannot be undone. So that's the show. I've always been interested in art as a form of environmental expression. I wanted to take random parts of the natural world and create art objects that are symbolic of people and their relationships with nature. A lot of influence comes from my Wampanoag background, but most of my inspiration comes from the materials themselves. I hope to teach people to respect nature through art, or at least to view the materials differently as an object of beauty and mystery. These pieces speak of our common global history and are meant to inspire higher spiritual vibrations and to connect the essence of our island to the rest of the world. So that's the show. And I just want to talk a little bit about what I do and how I do it. So this is the show went up at Pathways last year, which is a small performing arts space that is kind of a pop-up. It's seasonal. They did such a good job hanging the show. This was before it was totally done. So it's a little crooked and it doesn't have the labels, but we were going to do a workshop where I was going to bring boxes and lots of tchotchkes and share them with people. And it didn't end up happening. I had also was invited and scheduled another for Art Week in Eggertown, and that didn't happen. So recently I did my first workshop around the show at the MV Museum, and I'm really lucky to have done that. This is it in some other spaces. The first time I showed it was at the Makers Fair. So it was I just made a bunch of these boxes, more had been added, and I wanted to show it. So I brought it to the Makers Fair and I put it out on a table and I brought some things. And I had one young girl who I knew from preschool. Her little brother went to school with my daughter. So her and her mom came by and I gave her a box and some things. And her mom messaged me later that day and she said, Virginia was so into her project. And I said, well, what was her theme? And she ended up creating a photo booth because I had old film. And kids these days don't even know what film is because of everything's digital. So it was an old piece of film and she thought that was just really cool. So as it was mentioned, I think in the artist statement and around, some of these pieces were done by materials and themes, either done by color. The silver and gold hoard, obviously done by color, silver and gold, but that one was all metal. And for such a small piece, it's actually incredibly heavy. The pirate ship was done by the story that I was trying to tell. The black and white, obviously done by color, but also a little bit by theme. So it's interesting to inspire people in that direction. I've always tried to include my daughter. So this is the show at Chilmark. And
you look like a real artist.
So she came with her cousin and they got all dressed up and she had her little piece that she had in the show and we had a reception. And my cousin and I get together a lot. This is my daughter, Oceana, during the Legend of Moshe pageant. So we put on this performance every year. I made all of the clothing, the gourd, the fan that I'm wearing. She in this picture is wearing a community regalia, but since I've made her own piece. And even from a really young age. So this is me at the Artisans Festival in the summer. And there she is, a little baby. She wouldn't stay at the shows and people would always say, where's Oshie? And I'd say, well, I have to work here. So she, babies need attention and time and food and all of these things. And so it wasn't really practical for her to sit at the art show for 4 hours. But she's always been included. And my cousin and I, she's a professional beater. She's in the Bee Yellowtail Collective. And we get together for coffee and we'll work on projects. And I've said to her, it's just so important for these kids to see us doing this. So while I was writing that grant that I didn't get, it became a business plan. This is an image, it's fuzzy, but this was my old business card. So it was just a plain card with this little logo in the corner and, like my snail mail address, which nobody wants these days or needs. So I went to a workshop with Dawn Spears, who runs NIA, New England Foundation. She was NEFA, New England Foundation for the Arts, was when she did this workshop, but now she's NIA, Northeastern Alliance for Indigenous People, something like that. Check out her work. She said, use your own image. So I had rebranded my cards. I used this image, which I showed you in the beginning. And this has just been something that is really representative of my brand and my work. So when you see my show, my stuff at the show, and then you take away this card, even though these are old pieces, you really remember the color and the layout. Since I've now have my own website, this is kind of a moot card. I need to redo them. And the brochures that I made. So I applied for that grant and I didn't get it, but I said, you know what, I'm going to do all this stuff. So this is some of my more signature work. And it's a nice spread. You can check out my website. I think it will be linked in the chat, but it's www.islandnaturalsmv.com. So I really have created a signature for my work over the 15 years that I've done this. So people will see other people wearing my necklace and they'll say, oh, I saw somebody wearing your necklace at this restaurant. And I said, well, did you compliment them? Because I want them to know that, like, oh, I recognize that there's value in that I've been able to create this signature for my work. So another image that's kind of indicative of my work, I was doing a lot of online sales this year because of COVID. And these were some things that I was packaging up. And I said, you know what, this is a nice spread of my work. So I've started using my own images to brand me more. What I do is natural, found, and recycled materials. So this is I think it's a bird bone that I found, and then braided hemp. So anything that I can find, people give me junk jewelry that I take apart all the time. And it's really the materials that inspire me. Somebody said to me, it was a few years into working, maybe halfway through, I was probably 9 years in. And somebody said, oh, your work's become more refined. And I thought that was such a dirty word. I didn't like it at all, refined. And I was like, how do I get back to my original inspiration of using what's on hand, and that really inspires me. And then each piece is totally one of a kind and unique. These are some earrings made with beach stones and conch shell. And then I work with leather. So this is a fun little story. There's a leather worker, Leather Treasures MV. She's not native, but she's an islander. She's been working in leather for a long time. And she actually gets harvested deer skin from local hunters, and then she would ship them off and have them tanned. So she was giving me offcuts from her leather work, which is really great because then I'm using a byproduct of her industry. So I'm not paying anything for it, and I'm using what I can. And because I'm making things that are small, like these lighter cases, I can use the tiniest pieces of leather that she's not able to use. These are some of the pouches. They're all hand sewn, wampum buttons, sea glass buttons. This is a wholesale order that I recently did. I had a couple wholesale orders this year, which is great because of COVID. And they said, oh, can you do something kind of custom? And I said, geez, I don't know how much more custom. I'm one person, and I'm not using a sewing machine. I am sewing these and hand cutting them. So I was like, that's pretty custom. Again, my daughter got really into this, and she made little backpacks for all of her stuffies, and she wanted to sell them. And then when school started and she was doing virtual, they had if the theme was if I never had endeavored, and she chose sewing. So I thought that was so significant that she's gotten pretty good at it. She gets really into her project. She's gotten really good at braiding. Someday I'd love to just give it over to her. And have her do all these things that I do. I always tell her there's a space for you in my booth, and if you want to sell your stuff. So she's got that entrepreneurial spirit. These are some leather tassels, and these are little spirit bundles that I made a batch recently. I hadn't made them in years. So these are some of those. And these are them being used in an altar space. So just trying to show it in the different spaces. These are beach stones and recycled chains. wampum, beach wampum. So I find this on the beach. I've actually started seeding the wampum. So my family collected it forever, and we had jars and jars of it. And I used the best pieces. And then I realized I had all this junk. So I call myself Nettie Wampum Seed. I've done it twice. I take a big bag of the junky stuff I'm not using, and people give it to me. And I'm always like, yeah, this is not really something that I'm going to use. It's a big, sharp, ugly piece. So I've taken my shovel and my bag of wampum back down to the beach. I'm not going to tell you where because that's a well-kept secret. And I dig a hole and I buried the wampum, and I said a little prayer and intentions to send the calcium back into the ocean, but also to sustain myself. So I'll come back in 2 years, and I have noticed that there's a lot more wampum on that beach. And I've actually found beads, whether somebody lost their bracelet or if there's another wampum artist out there, you can tell me that maybe people are going down and seeding the beach as well. We also have a beach on the island called Marble Beach, which is the same thing. People have gotten so into it that people go down and they throw the marbles, and you can find beach glass marbles. These are some earrings that I made using a recycled bracelet. So my auntie has a shop up at the cliffs, and she makes, Berta Welch, she makes amazing wampum work as well. But she has this little tourist shop, so she gets a lot of junk jewelry. And this was a bracelet. It was actually, they were stacked next to each other. So there were like hundreds of pieces of this shell in this one little bracelet that was broken that she gave to me. So I started making these with my bead soup, and which is, any beater knows what bead soup is. And it's a limited edition item. So once I run out of that, that will be the end of it. Same thing with this. These are some shell hoops. These are tiny shells, if you can tell, and they have little holes and they're strung in a hoop. So hoop earrings for the natural girl. Same thing. These are shells that I've popped a hole into and made earrings out of. So you can find these on my website. These are fish vertebrae. So that's another thing that I use, bones. These are little tiny shells with vintage birds. So Berta had given me some of these vintage cut shell birds, and my daughter helped to co-design these. So around Christmas, we got really into these nesting bird earrings. So she helped make these, and we were featured in the local newspaper for that, which was really cool. This is a leather bracelet that I popped the holes in. They're offshoots from earrings that I make. So for years, I was trying to figure out how can I use this material? And then I finally came up with something that I really liked. So again, like, I only make them when I have enough. My friend was like, well, just go buy the rawhide and cut them up. And I was like, it wouldn't be the same. So I only make them when I have enough material to make them. These are my little people. Pugwudgies are something that's in our culture. They're little people. Processed turkey vertebrae to make these. So these are the turkey vertebrae. And these are the outcome. They're really special. This is a picture of a pugwudgie. I'm going to go a little faster. So I just did a batch of these last night. I haven't posted. These are the Dreamcatchers that I make. I use local grapevines and domestic molted feathers. So again, like, letting the material dictate the shape. So if they're green, they bend more. They cure for about a year before I actually even make them, and they're quite a process. This is at the Cultural Survival Bazaar in Boston. There's a close-up of one of the Dreamcatchers. And then this is something I want to speak of. I know I don't have a lot of time, but this is a horseshoe crab basket. When I was a fellow at the Peabody Essex Museum, I said to them, what do you have specific to gayhead? And they showed me one of these. I'd never seen them before, and I'd never seen them since out in the community. So I started making them. And I was talking to Leah when we were previewing my presentation, and I realized I've actually resurrected this art in my community. And so this was over 15 years ago. This one I made. And I made it after she showed me. This year I collected shells because I'm working on a teaching kit for the cultural center that I'm on the board for, this museum that's behind me in my background. This was done, I made some tiny ones. I'm getting used to the material. I had to pre-punch the holes before I sewed it so I wouldn't break them, and they're Mod Podge. I actually gifted one of these to the Peabody Essex Museum. I've broken some since, so they're really fragile, but they will have this in their collection forever. So that's something really special that I've been able to do. And I've been making them in the community with our tribal kids and just for our museum. So now they're starting to be seen. And this is recently, I made some gourd rattles and some horseshoe crab baskets. This is me working when I was in college. When I got out of college, I ran the museum for 3 years while I started my Island Naturals business. These are actually turtle kids. So these are tribal kids. And before I ran the museum, I ran the turtle program. And so the kids would come up to the museum once a week and we would do different projects. This one might have been a scavenger hunt that I created. This is sewing the basket. So this is one that I did recently. We're going to start teaching some classes to Wampanoag folks for artist classes and entrepreneurial classes. So taking some of the things that I've learned and my successes and passing them on to the next generation. And one of the things is just these little demos that I've done. So this is the basket being sewed up. Those classes, I just did one Saturday on storytelling. So that was the first one that we've done. The next one that we're hoping to do is Gourd Rattles. So I just got a message from the boss, Berta, who I mentioned has the shop, and she's the president of the cultural center. She's one of my cousins, auntie, and so she just got the gourds in, and we're going to put kits together that we can send out to folks so that they can make their own rattles. So this is another Legend of Moshe pageant. In my regalia, I made the mantle, the skirt, this choker, and there's the rattle. So here's a little, this was me experimenting with the sound. And there are beads in here. So before I sealed them up, I wanted to make sure that I had the right sound. And these are the finished products. So the picture I showed you before were some that I had made previously. And then these are the two that I just made in the last month. This is my first necklace ever, which I will never sell. And I used to photograph my things on a black background, but as we learn, we live and we learn. So I started using a lighter background. People said, lighten it up. These are some of my favorite pieces. So I'll just let you see those real quick. Yeah, I used to do consignment. I still do consignment, but I would send these little thumbnails with the description and the stones and the price and everything. And I realized it was just sucking the ink out of my printer. So I changed my format and I started using the lighter background, which was really helpful. So that's that. These are all sold necklaces. This is one of my very first mermaid necklaces. It was 3 strands, again, photographed on this black background, which was a notebook. It's not a very good photo. iPhones have come a long way, so I've had a lot of tech challenges as an artist, but now you can just point and shoot. So this is a fun one that I had made. It sat around for years. It was a very expensive piece, and finally it sold. And I got a call from this guy that said, oh, my wife was interested in this necklace. And I was like, I know exactly which one you're talking about. It's gone. It's so unique. So I thought it was a commission, and I spent 7 hours making this new necklace while my baby was a tiny baby. And I said, I called him, I said, your necklace is done. And he said, oh, I can't commit to it. The other one was so unique. And I was like, and so is this one. Well, it sat around for 2 more years. And then his wife came along to the art show and she said, oh, this kind of looks like the one that you had before. And I said, I just want you to know I made this necklace for you. And she bought it. And I said, you tell your husband that was your necklace. So I try to make everything that I can. This is my sign that I sanded. My friend had a carving tool, and then I actually used a ballpoint pen to fill it in. It looks burnt, but it's not. So make it work. This is my display at the show. So just seeing me selling. This is at our big Labor Day show, which is inside. So that's my setup. This is a weird thing that I do when I'm doing my inventory for the beginning of the season. I spread everything out. These are current inventory. with the exception, I think a couple sold at Christmas. So I spread them out and I try to have a sliding scale. So the lower end, things that are older or not as much work. And then I have these great pictures of reference. When I look back and I can see like, oh yeah, that sold, that sold. This is another one that I did, just a fun picture. And this is another weird thing that I do. I like to, when I make a batch of new necklaces, I stack them just for fun. And so I can put some good energy into them. This is a piece that I made. These are projects I make with no intention to sell. I stacked these turkey feathers. I saw this in a photograph at the Plymouth Plantation and I said, I can do that. I'm going to make that. And I just kind of figured it out. Some bottled clay, also not for sale, but I use for teaching. The World on Turtle's Back. So this is a piece that I beaded, the Iroquois creation story. And I use these things when I'm teaching. So even though this is a fuzzy picture, you can see the spread, and I challenge the kids to find the one thing that I didn't make, which is this item here. It's a talking stick with a rat's head. The kids love that. But it's just a fun game. And then it gives me a chance to talk about all the different items that I bring and why they're special. So this is me teaching. And this is a book that I wrote and illustrated. If anyone wants to publish my next book, I'm looking for a publisher. It's a great fable. Everyone's blaming everyone. It turns out it's nobody's fault. It's so classic. And then some COVID challenges, like just thrusting my business online, which I had been doing and meant to do, but just doing it more. And then I'm going to the post office every other day and I realize, oh my God, I'd rather just go to a show and make as much money in a weekend than I make like over the month with all the extra hassle and all the work and all the uncertainties that come along with selling online. So, but the lasting effects are that I did all this stuff and, you know, hopefully it will be self-perpetuating. But when you're making one-of-a-kind items, it's really challenging to have that be the case. You put a lot of energy in and it's hard to get it to pay off. And then just ceremonies. So every solstice, equinox, I take my kid and my old neighbor and her kid and we go down and we give a little offering. So if you don't have really great headshots or professional photographers, this is the one they use for the PR. Take a great selfie and use some filters. So I'm just showing you a little workaround. And then if you want, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest under Island Naturals or Jannette Vanderhoop. So we want to open up time for questions and answers.
Yes, so just as a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions, please, you can use the chat feature, or you can click on to participants and find your name and click raise hand, and we'll call on you. All right, Amy Weber has a question. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, it's so good to see you.
Hi, Amy. This is one of my collectors, by the way.
Yeah, I love stopping by the artisans to see you. I didn't make it out this past summer because of everything that was going on. So when I saw that you were doing this today, I said, oh, I've got to join. So thank you to everybody who put this together. I think this is a great opportunity to bring artists like Jannette out to our community here in Rhode Island and beyond. So thank you, Leah, and everybody else who was involved in bringing Jannette out. And it's also great to see what you're working on now. You know, I know that you've got the jewelry always going on, and the boxes are so unique. I wasn't able to ever see them in person. And what I think is really interesting is that you can see them in person, but also it really worked well virtually. I really liked what you were doing with reading the poem and then focusing in on different parts of each different box. Like that was really cool. I just thought, you know, you could take this on the road virtually, so to speak, and do, I don't know if you've been doing presentations like this or.
So this was my first virtual one, and I actually got really excited about it too. Was telling Leah, like, as I was thinking about it more, I was like, this is something. And you really do want to see these pieces in person. You really want to sit with them. When I showed them at Mokamats the first time, I put them down in the booths, half of them down in the booth, so you could actually sit next to them. But the opportunity to photograph them and show you a different angle and perspective, which I really enjoy about my work too, when I photograph my jewelry, is I can kind of zoom in and show you things that I want you to see. So thank you. I'm glad that worked.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And have you thought about doing, like, I know you said that you did an in-person workshop, I think, at the museum, but have you done any Zoom workshops? Like, people could gather their own materials and a container of sorts, and you could like talk them through or something like that?
I think that's a great idea. I'm really excited to workshop the show. And I think that one of the things I was thinking after the first one, which was actually kind of the second one, because the Makers Fair kind of counts, I thought, maybe I'll get a grant to do these workshops. So that's a fun idea. I think if people had boxes and items, or like you would get it together beforehand and then maybe show the show and then do a workshop. It's a good idea.
Yeah, that would be cool. I'd be interested in something like that. And hopefully I'll get to see you in person out on the vineyard this summer. Fingers crossed.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks. Good to see you.
So if anyone has any more questions, we welcome you again to use the chat or to use the raise hand feature. While people are collecting their thoughts, I want to point your attention to the chat, where we have posted links to Jannette's website, Island Naturals MV, and also her Facebook and her Instagram. We do have a question in here from the chat. This is from Cheryl Savageau, and she has a bunch of gourds and she would like to know how to make a rattle. Will you be doing any workshops on that? That would be open.
Thank you. That's a good question. We actually we're in the process of creating, I'm just on the board, so I'm not actually the person doing some of the work for this, but we're creating these classes that we're going to do for tribal folks. So I'm not sure what that will end up being, if it will extend beyond. I'd be happy to show you how to do that if you have gourds. They have to be kind of small. So yeah, we're going to put some kits together and we'll see where it goes. We were talking about, do we sell the kits to the public, or is this just going to be something that we do for tribal folks? So we'll see.
Maybe this is something the Haffenreffer could facilitate down the road, Jannette, if you're interested.
Yeah, like actually doing the workshop part.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We've been doing digital workshops for those of you who have followed us, and we've had great success with them.
Well, so on that note, I actually got invited recently from the Cultural Survival Bazaar there's like an artist group that meets for luncheon, and they had 4 different people that she contacted, and I had proposed, showing the horseshoe crabs, and I didn't know if I was going to get it, and I guess I did. So that'll be interesting. I think virtual formats are kind of difficult, but to teach something hands-on.
Or they definitely have their challenges, but it's also a great new way of learning and reaching different audiences. And so we can have conversations in the future, potentially, about this. We do have another question. And this is from Leah. She appreciated how much you talked about your intergenerational learning with Oshi and your work at the Cultural Center. If you're comfortable sharing, she would love to hear more about how you got started with your artwork and who you learned from.
Wow. Okay, that's like a lifetime story. So I've always just been an artist. I've always wanted to make art. When I went to liberal arts school, I went to Pitzer College. And when I went to school, I actually just took an art class every semester because I wanted to be able to feel like I was working, but still enjoying what I was doing. So every semester I took one art class, and that way when I needed a break, I could work on my art projects. And I actually almost double majored in art. Except I had to take, I had a bad experience with an art history course. I got an F on a 7-page term paper that I wrote, and it was so boring. The teacher talked like this is Machu Picchu. And I went to a small college where I was 12 students in a class, and this was a giant lecture hall. He was so boring. And I'm sitting there going, why am I here right now when I should be there learning this? And so I went abroad my first semester of my senior year, and I came back, and I had to take one art history course to double major in art, and I just didn't want to do it. But I had a professor who I'd worked with for 4 years who was teaching the senior art class, and she recognized that I would have been an art major, that I would have been in this class. So she invited me to take the senior art class that was just for students who were majoring in art. And that meant that I had a show and a critique. So I basically did every single thing that I needed to double major in art, except for that second art history course. And I'll tell you, kids who are students still, take the art history course, because when you look back, you'll say to yourself, I should have done that. I should have done that. Not that it matters or changed the course of my life, but I'm mostly self-taught. When I got out of school, so my study abroad, I collected some beads, and I came home and I made that first necklace with the wampum. I had been kind of dabbling in wampum, just drilling with a hand drill. And earlier on, I gave a lot of my stuff away. And then I took an etching class. I took painting classes. I took pottery. I took I did every kind of medium you could imagine. And so I made this one necklace, and I said, this is something, and I want to do this. And so I knew the Artisans Festival was happening, and I didn't have a car. I didn't have a car for like 4 years when I was in college, and I didn't have a car for the year after. I hitchhiked everywhere on the vineyard, and I saved my money, and I said, I'm going to buy a car so I can do this show. So 2006, our first powwow that we resurrected in Aquinnah was my debut. It went really well, and I was very encouraged. It was in the fall. And so that winter I applied. And so it was one summer out of college. The next summer I was doing the shows, had my little RAV4, and I've done them since. So that's been like 15, 16, I don't even know how many years at this point. So I was just really determined to be an artist. And I just said, whatever I do in this life, I'm going to make art of some kind. And the projects that I don't intend to sell are the ones that are really fun, like the regalia, the horseshoe crab baskets and things. When I get inspired, the rest is kind of work. What's fun is just the things you want to make. So these boxes were one of those things. I just wanted to make them. And that's why when it culminated, I said, now I want to show them. These need to be seen. And also the poems and the storyline I created after to make them a cohesive show. It's like, how do you show this as a body of work? Yeah, it looks good together. The colors actually kind of work. You know, they're black, white, gold, and mostly that's it. So this is just something that I wanted to do. I really am self-taught, and when I think about quitting sometimes, which we all do, I remind myself, just keep doing what you do, because this is my life's work. So it might take my whole life. And one of my greatest fantasies is that someone will make it their life's work to collect my life's work. So someday, like 200 years from now, some museum is going to say, you know what? And then there's going to be debates. They say, that's not a Jannette Vanderhoop original. And they're like, but this is her early work. She didn't photograph. I've photographed everything that I have ever done, really. Just the big necklaces, not my small earrings and things. I lost all my photos when my grandfather passed away because I'm a tech moron. And then my daughter, when she was tiny, so at the time I paid all this money to try to resurrect these pictures, my daughter dumped milk in the laptop, and that was it. So it was a lesson in letting go. And I thought I lost all this work. And then I realized a few years later, when I got my new computer, which took me forever, the grant didn't pay for that. And it turns out I needed that. I met this woman once that said, why don't I tell you how you can help me? She was applying for a grant for Indigenous people, and they end up kind of putting you into boxes. I had to defend my art to a museum for a show. They wanted just lapidary workers who made beads and cut beads. And I said, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not going to change the format. This is what I'm doing. And if anything, I would move more into recycled materials, because I read one article on the shell industry in the South Pacific and the way that they're just taking every little tiny thing out of the ocean. And I'm like, you know what? There's so much material and it inspires me. And so I'm just going to do more recycled. And I had to defend my art to them. And it was really hard. And it was also really validating. So I think that the things that challenge me sometimes are the things that keep me going. Anyway, that's totally off subject, but I'm self-taught and I'm really determined. And if you don't ask me questions, I'll just keep talking.
I think we do have time for one last question, and it is from Crecia. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce your name correctly, but Crecia would like to know, does Jannette have a favorite medium to work with? It seems like you work in a lot of different mediums, but what is your favorite?
Thank you. That's a good question. Well, my signature necklaces that I do is beach wampum. So I collect it and then just drill it. So that's kind of where I have the most fun. But the medium I like to work in the most is whatever is on hand. And also like so I think that working in lots of different mediums makes it so that I don't get bored. And sometimes I look at these painters who are selling paintings for like $10,000 and I'm like, I'm in the wrong medium. But then again, like jewelry sells, and I do well at the shows. So this year's been an interesting challenge with COVID, but I still sold some pieces by putting them on consignment and a couple online, but no one wants to buy a big expensive piece of jewelry that they're not emotionally invested in. So it's nice. I do have some collectors, and they know what they're getting is quality, and that, you know, hopefully these are heirloom pieces that people will have. So I think I'm really proud of that work. And then I mostly like to just make stuff. I just want to make things.
Wonderful. I also just want to apologize to Crecia, not Crecia, for that. I see your pronunciation now, but I just want to say a huge katapatosh thank you very much to Jannette for joining us and sharing your work, your poetry, your life story with us. And if anyone in the audience has any further questions, please reach out to us at Haffenreffer_programs, and we can send those right to Jannette. We can also, we have also linked you to future programs coming up for the rest of the semester, Wednesdays in March and April. And we just really want to say thank you, everyone who has come to this program today. But most of all, thank you to Jannette.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited that this that the performance part was recorded, and that I really look forward to seeing what we might do with that.
Yes, and that is an excellent reminder, because this was recorded in the next couple of days. This presentation will be uploaded to YouTube, and you will all receive a link to it as well.
Thank you. Go check out my website.
Pishkananamu, everyone. See you all later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.